Thank you for joining Minding Your Brain. Today we're going to talk about brain injuries that require surgery. My past interviews have focused on the deficits resulting from a brain injury, but I thought we would explore what happens between the initial injury and the rehabilitation. I'm always fascinated about the science behind surgical intervention that saves lives and allows patients to make it to the post-acute stage. My name is Candace Gantt. I am a brain injury survivor and the executive director and founder of the Mind Your Brain Foundation. My guest today is Dr. Dmitriy Petrov, assistant professor of surgery at the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Petrov's received his BA and MD at Rutgers University and completed his training at the University of Pennsylvania and an infold fellowship at Skull Base and Oncological Surgery at Wellington, New Zealand. His clinical practice is at the Penn Medicine Presbyterian Medical Center, where he takes care of complex neurotrauma cases alongside his elective practice. Dr. Petrov's research is in translational models of acute traumatic brain injury and neurological care, focusing on decreasing secondary injury after neurotrauma. Dr. Petrov also has an interesting hobby that I think you'll find curious given his profession as a brain surgeon. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time, and I think what you're going to share with us will be just remarkable and a value to our viewers.
Thank you, Candace. It's a pleasure to be here.
I wanted to start by asking you to please tell us about your work at Penn Presbyterian in neurosurgery.
Sure, of course. So Penn Presbyterian is a hospital in the middle of Philadelphia. It's where we take care of all of our trauma in the Penn system. We have a brand new trauma hospital over 5 years, and we have a very robust trauma program. And in addition to that, for our department, we have a very robust neurotrauma program, where myself and my partners, as well as our colleagues in neurocritical care, so the neurological intensivists, take care of very complex neurotrauma, take part in clinical trials nationally and internationally, and just provide the best care that we can for traumatic brain injury, in addition to other things.
And what portion of the work that you do is centered on traumatic brain injury? Is that 50%, or is that a big population that comes to you?
I think it's difficult to quantify exactly how much, but fortunately now traumatic brain injury is less of a problem than it used to be in the past because of seatbelts, because of car design, because of more awareness. But there's still a significant amount of complex traumatic brain injury that we do take care of at Penn, and compared to our capabilities years ago now, we're much further along, but it's still a significant problem that we're still learning a lot about, and there's still a lot of unknowns.
So I would like to explore that and get some more information about what exactly is your role. What role do you play when someone comes into the emergency room or gets to the trauma center?
Of course. So the very first thing when a patient comes in through the trauma bay or through the emergency department and there's a suspected traumatic brain injury, the trauma team does a very systematic assessment of the patient, including imaging of the brain as well as other parts of the body. And if there's any evidence of traumatic brain injury, our absolutely wonderful residents get called down, and they perform the initial assessment, and we are immediately involved. And then we judge the patient based on something called the Glasgow Coma Scale to see how significant the injury is. And that's based on how awake the patient is, are they able to converse, et cetera. And also taking into account their brain imaging at the time. And then from there, we triage the patient to either mild, moderate, or severe traumatic brain injury. My focus clinically and research-wise is on the severe traumatic brain injury. And if that's the case, oftentimes patients will need an invasive monitor where we can monitor what the brain is doing, what the brain physiology is doing during the course of their hospitalization, how we can best tweak numbers and tweak the parameters that we have control over to optimize brain health during this acute time and decrease other causes of injury during the hospitalization. Unfortunately, sometimes the brain is so bruised and swollen that it swells. And so unlike the abdomen or the chest, where if something swells, the cavity can adapt, the skull is a closed box. And so when the brain swells, we do our best to treat it with medications to decrease some of that swelling. But sometimes it requires surgical intervention. And if that's the case, we intervene and we take a piece of the skull off to allow the brain to swell. And then after the acute period, when the swelling goes down, we put the skull right back on to make the head back the way it was. And so the journey of a patient with a severe traumatic brain injury is quite fraught with many issues. And I feel very privileged and lucky to be part of the Penn system. We have an absolutely amazing neurocritical care department. We have some brilliant colleagues. My surgical colleagues are the best in the world, and so despite all these problems, I think we do a very good job of managing these problems.
Indeed, and I would agree with you then, because I was a patient at the Penn Presbyterian Trauma Center with my brain injury, and I did have a craniotomy and a cranioplasty. But what I find really interesting, and maybe you could tell us a little bit more about this, why do some people have a remarkable recovery or successful recovery, however you measure that, and other people don't have that? They have lifelong disabilities as a result of their injuries.
If I had the answer, I would be a much richer man. We're still looking for a lot of these answers. The simple answer is we don't know. And we're doing our best to figure out why. Some patients with a seemingly mild injury have lifelong disability, and some patients with a severe injury seem to be doing okay. I think it's sort of both we don't know and it's not that simple. On the we don't know part, we really don't know. There's some things on imaging and some things on initial assessments that can sort of give us some guidance on which direction a patient will go. On the other hand, it's not that simple. Even patients who survive a severe injury and come out fine, quote unquote, will still have some difficulties, and it's a lot of unspoken things that sometimes patients find difficulty with. You can speak to that way more than I can. But I think it's all on the spectrum. So even patients that do really well still have some sequelae of traumatic brain injury. But to answer your question, we really don't know. And that's a lot of what my research focuses on and what we collaborate with on the brain rehabilitation side of medicine as well.
And in order, excuse me, in order to assess a patient, and it depends on where the injury was occurred and the force of which it did incur. I know that there's so many variables. I think that adds to the challenge of assessing and understanding the outcomes.
Certainly. Well, so if you injure somebody's kidney, which is a vital organ, let's say, right? Every piece of the kidney is a little piece that does the same exact thing as every other piece, right? So if you cut off half a kidney, the other half does the exact same thing that the part that you cut out did. The brain, every cubic millimeter of brain does something different, something distinct. And everybody's brain is a little bit different. Everybody's skull is a little bit different. Everybody's supporting musculature that supports the head and how it moves and responds to impact is a little bit different. And so every single injury is distinct and singular. And even though there's some patterns that are followed across the spectrum of TBI, it's exceedingly difficult to say that somebody with pattern A will have outcome B, because we are still looking at it with a very through a very inexact lens. Even with, advanced imaging on MRI, even with invasive monitoring, even with all of the tools that we could bring to bear, it's still an inexact science of predictions. And so we have patients that come in completely comatose, in layman's terms, that make a great recovery. And we have patients that come in doing fairly well, but then have lifelong difficulties. And so it's very frustrating for all of us, but it's very hard to predict.
Yes. So tell us, where do you see it going in 5 years? Do you have any kind of prediction or any kind of hope for what's to come? Can we improve on what we're doing now?
Of course. So traumatic brain injury, the way that I sort of think about it in my mind is that there's an initial insult where the brain is injured. And then just like any other part of your body, it swells, there's changes in blood flow, changes in physiology, all these things happen. And there's something called secondary injury where things that happen in the subacute period over the next several days after severe injury could also inflict a lot of damage with lasting consequences. And so right now we're really learning a lot about brain physiology and what happens during the acute insult and really what happens immediately after, and what are the things that we could do to improve neuronal survival and brain physiology to allow the patient to have the most meaningful recovery, to save as much brain, to allow the most normal functioning to persist.
Yes.
Because we can't change the car accident, the assault, the whatever happened initially, but what we can change is what we do for a patient once they go through our doors.
Yes.
And so in the next several years, we're really drilling down on what are the interventions that will help us in the end, that will help us achieve outcomes that are favorable. And so right now we're part of the BOOST trial.
Indeed, I have heard of that.
Which is a huge deal. One of our colleagues, Ramon Diaz-Aristia, is a leader of the study nationally, and he's an absolutely brilliant physician that is leading this effort to figure out how we can monitor and assess brain oxygenation. So while blood is getting to the brain, how much oxygen is it able to drop off? How much does it need to drop off? How well can we monitor that? Does that make a difference? And so that's one of the big pushes that we have, alongside a significant amount of other ones as well. And so we are working very hard to figure out in the lab and in the hospital what are the things that we can do to decrease the secondary injury and improve outcomes long term. And so hopefully over the next 5 years, we'll have a much better grasp of that. And so right now, a lot of our treatments are based on evidence that we think is working, but we'll have a much, much better idea.
And the outcome that you're playing such a huge role in the success of it, and then how you need that collaborative effort to
absolutely
instill the right direction, instill the right rehabilitation, everything that follows that. I think that's important that it has in stages, that we have that science behind it and the research
to
achieve great outcomes.
Absolutely a team effort, absolutely, because we see our patients very early on, right in the acute period, and we have great collaborators, but then there's also this whole journey of once you get out of the hospital, you go to the rehab, and after rehab, what happens next? And so,
that path is long and hard.
The path is long, indeed.
I wanted to ask you as well about your, as I'm sure all of our viewers can tell, a brain neurosurgeon.
That's very kind of you.
And doing a lot of research, meaningful research. You have a young family.
I do.
And then you started, which would be the start. Well, you have, maybe I should start there. We should talk a little bit about your hobbies, how you fit in those hobbies in such a busy schedule.
Well, you have to. Brain health is not only, what happens after injury. It's also about keeping yourself well. And I think all of us in high-stress jobs, and all of us in the modern world with all of our distractions, with all of the things that we go through every single day, I think it's important to have hobbies. It's important to have outlets.
Now, does your hobby, which I suggested at the beginning, conflict with what you do as a neurosurgeon?
No, absolutely not. So
tell our viewers, please.
Sure, of course.
They're excited to know.
So my hobby is something called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's something that I got into in college. It's a grappling art that's sort of a mix of Japanese judo and a lot of Brazilian influence. And so it was started by the Gracie family and has become a worldwide phenomenon. And so I got into it in college as something fun. And it turned into something more for me. I haven't been able to practice it as much as I'd like to over the years because of training, because of the stresses of my job, et cetera. But I definitely make an effort as much as I can. It's a wonderful community of people. It's very empowering. It's very supportive. It's incredibly challenging, both physically and mentally. And for me, it's a form of active meditation. It's a place where I can go and I feel welcome and I feel empowered and I feel at peace. And even though it's sort of controlled violence in a way, I'm able to turn off everything else and be completely in the moment, and afterwards I feel recharged.
So I want to talk about that controlled violence, because
sure.
that is what I thought was the conflict with having concussions and brain injuries. So how do you manage that to prevent any assaults, any injuries?
So the basis of it is self-defense. It's a way for people to defend themselves against violence, and it's not so much to be violent or to be aggressive. It's very defensive. It's how to be safe, how to be secure, how to feel confident. It's a sport. It's not. It doesn't involve any striking. It's all grappling. So it's wrestling, throws, how to hold an opponent, how to get out of a bad situation. And so while it seems as though there's a lot of violence involved, and certainly it is a martial art, it is, in my opinion, a great way to be safe and to feel strong and confident. And I recommend it highly to everybody, and I can't wait until my daughter's old enough to start.
Oh, and that'd be great. I'm sure she'll have a good teacher then.
I hope
all
so.
Your passion. And you're using that, your hobby, with your experience in neurosurgery to start a new foundation. And that indeed is, again, in your free time, that is indeed an opportunity for us to bring awareness and to gain some opportunity to be involved in your community over Jiu-Jitsu, and also an awareness to talk about brain injuries at the same time.
Of course. So because of Jiu-Jitsu's connection to the combat sports world, there's a lot of unmet need for taking care of traumatic brain injury. Because of that world, it's just like football. It's just like all of these other contact sports that don't get as much attention as football. So Jiu-Jitsu itself doesn't result in that many head injuries, but the rest of the things that follow with the rest of the combat sports, because they all sort of travel in the same circles. There's a lot of that, unfortunately, and the Jiu-Jitsu community is really coming around to seeing that as a big problem and addressing that. And for me, it was a way to bring together my passions. My passion is my work and the science behind it, and what I do every single day, and my hobby. And I had this absolutely, off-the-wall idea that I think we should raise money for traumatic brain injury and survivors, families, research, and what a better way to do it than to hold a tournament and sort of bring these two communities together. And it started off as an idea, and I spoke to the McLaurice brothers who run my gym, who are absolutely amazing members of the community, both Jiu-Jitsu and in Philadelphia. And they put me in contact with Rose Gracie, who's an absolute tour de force. And so this has come together in this organic manner, and I couldn't be happier. So we're holding a tournament in February.
I'm excited about that, and I applaud you for that effort and the passion that you gained from all of this to really make an impact in the community. And there is a tournament coming up. There
is. So it's on February 23rd, and we're hoping to have a lot of participation. All of our proceeds go to the TBI Recovery Foundation, the TBI Recovery Project, rather.
Yes.
It is my foundation that I started along with several of my collaborators from Penn and across the country, really. And as well, and the proceeds go towards TBI Recovery Project, towards Rose Gracie Foundation, and towards Mind Your Brain at Penn to support your efforts and everybody in the Penn community to bring awareness and bring resources and bring all of the things that we have to bear to improve the lives of traumatic brain injury survivors. And so this is our inaugural event, but the aim of our foundation is really to bridge the gap between the medical community, between the patients, between the research community, between industry, and really be a hub for support of all of those communities all at the same time and really build connections. And I couldn't be more excited.
That collaboration is really lifting up you and the foundation. How did you, if there's someone who would like more information about the foundation, is there some way that they can contact you or get more information about the tournament?
Absolutely. So TBIrecoveryproject.org is our website. There's plenty of information there. It links to all of the information about the tournament, about the resources that we have, about our future upcoming projects, about our team. So that's a great source of information. As far as the tournament itself, we're calling it the PA Submission Series. And so that PASubmissionSeries.com is a quick and easy way to access it. And of course, my email is readily available through the Penn system, and I'm happy to take any and all questions. And
that's great.
And all that about.
Let's talk about what they should expect. Are you looking for participants in the Jiu-Jitsu tournament, or are you looking for spectators, and what might a spectator experience while they're there?
Well, I'm always looking for participants, obviously. The more the merrier, because like I said, all the proceeds go towards traumatic brain injury. And so the more participants we get, the more we can contribute. Spectators should expect to see something very fascinating. If you don't have any experience with Jiu-Jitsu, it looks like wrestling.
Yeah.
It looks like it's a lot of pretty incredible athleticism. You have to really pay attention to follow the action. The athletes are just top notch, and it's really an incredibly fun thing to participate in. And for me, at the very least, it's very fun to watch. And we're hoping to bring a lot of high-level participants, and so there's plenty for spectators to also pay attention to, and for fans to come and
cheer
and see some.
Will we have some favorites? Will you be participating?
Oh, gosh. So I really wanted to, and when I spoke to Rose, who's like I said, a tour de force and just an amazing individual, and has so much experience putting these things together, and she shook her head and said, "You're going to be running around like crazy, making sure things go." So the first time around, I think I'm just going to gnash my nails and make sure everything goes well. But I'm hoping to make this an annual thing, and next year or the year after that, if things are going smoothly and we're sort of an autopilot, maybe I can participate. But
it would be terrific, because I think everyone would enjoy. Once you know one, you always root for someone. At least I like to think so.
Oh, sure.
And so it would give us an opportunity to have a celebrity competing, and having your own cheering section would be great.
I'm not sure if I'll consider myself a celebrity of any sort.
Yes, but it would be fun to watch, I'm sure.
I hope so.
I hope so. And I wanted to, is there anything that we should talk about that we haven't talked about before we close today? Have we covered everything? Is there a message in the recovery of a brain injury survivor, or how to be more active? Maybe that would be a good message to deliver to some of the brain injury survivors that might be watching, to stay active after their recovery or during their recovery, to make sure that the outcome is as successful as they're able to make it.
I think if I had one message for traumatic brain injury survivors, I think it would have to be two. One is that you still have a lot of life to live. We know so little about what influences outcomes in the end, and recovery is honestly a lifelong process. And something awful like traumatic brain injury happens, but you still have so much to give, so much to contribute, so much to experience. And so I find a lot of patients and families get discouraged, and I would just say that so true. I meet you at the worst point of your life, and by the time if you're lucky and you make a recovery, by the time you talk to me afterwards, you might not even remember who I am, or having met me in the beginning, which is okay. But there's still so much afterwards. And so I guess my second message would be, you're not alone. The community is there. The community is growing. There's a lot of individuals who are invested and interested in helping afterwards, like yourself. And your work has been absolutely inspiring and so vital to the field and to our patients.
Thank you.
And you are not alone, I think, is the message. And so what I'm hoping to do with our foundation, with the TBI Recovery Project, partnering with your organization as well as others, is to bring a connection to what's happening in industry, what's happening in trials, what's happening in medicine, and how you can participate and be part of the community of traumatic brain injury survivors and caregivers, and make it meaningful and get the help you need, and realize that it's a big problem, and it's everywhere. It's in combat sports, it's in other sports, it's in car accident and assault survivors, it's in our veterans. And so the community is very large and growing, and there's so much attention now to this, and you are absolutely not alone, and there's a lot of support, and we're here to continue to be part of the team. To be that safety net, going forward.
Carry you to the next steps in your lives.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Fascinating information. I'm sure everyone will enjoy. Can you tell us one last time about your email link or the foundation website?
So it's tbirecoveryproject.org is the foundation website, and all that information is available there. And specifically for the tournament to benefit traumatic brain injury, that's the pasubmissionseries.com.
Thank you.
Thank you, Candace.
If you would like more information about brain injury or to learn about the remarkable work of the Mind Your Brain Foundation, please visit us at mindyourbrainfoundation.org. We would love to hear from you. You can email us through there. We'd love to know what you think about any of the broadcasts, and also to get information about the Jujitsu competition coming up.